The massive ship hung in space like a silver needle against the black void. Inside its gleaming halls, Ambassador Zethkar stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council. His tall frame cast a shadow across the holographic display, but showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness. "Honored delegates," Zethkar began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "We have discovered another primitive world. The species calls itself human, and their planet Earth. They have somehow managed to survive on what can only be described as a death world." The other delegates shifted in their seats. A death world was the term used for planets so hostile that no civilized species could possibly live there. These worlds had extreme weather, deadly creatures, poisonous atmospheres, and unstable geology. Most civilized species avoided such places entirely. The planet has massive storms that can destroy entire cities, Zethkar continued. The oceans are filled with creatures that can swallow ships whole. The land shifts without warning, creating mountains and destroying them again. The atmosphere contains levels of oxygen that would be toxic to most species. Yet somehow these humans have not only survived, but spread across the entire planet. He gestured to the hologram, which now showed images of human cities. "Look at how they build their settlements. They construct them knowing that nature will try to destroy them. When earthquakes level their cities, they simply rebuild. When storms flood their lands, they pump out the water and continue. When volcanoes bury their towns in ash, they dig out and start again." One of the delegates, a small creature with large eyes, raised a tentacle. "If they can survive such conditions, perhaps they are stronger than they appear." Zethkar laughed, a sound like wind through metal. "Stronger? They have barely developed spaceflight. Their weapons are primitive chemical explosives. Their ships are slow and clumsy. They have no energy shields, no quantum processors, no gravitational manipulators. They are little more than clever animals who happen to survive on a world that should have killed them long ago." The hologram changed to show the human space fleet. The ships looked crude and functional, built for utility rather than elegance. They were painted in dull colors and covered with armor plating that suggested they expected to be shot at regularly. "Their entire fleet consists of perhaps 200 vessels," Zethkar said. "Most are converted mining ships and exploration craft. They have no battleships, no planet killers, no weapons of mass destruction. By our standards, they are defenseless." Far from the council chamber, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Frontier. The ship was humanity's newest exploration vessel, built to find new worlds and make contact with alien species. Morrison had been hoping their first contact would be peaceful. The message they had just received suggested otherwise. "Captain," said Commander Lisa Brooks, approaching with a datapad in her hands, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. It's being broadcast on all frequencies." Morrison nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the image of Ambassador Zethkar. The alien's face was long and narrow, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. His eyes were large and black, and when he spoke, his voice carried a tone of absolute authority. "Primitive humans," Zethkar said. "I am Ambassador Zethkar of the Valthari Empire. We have come to claim your world for our growing territory. You will surrender your planet within 7 solar cycles or face complete annihilation. Your species will be relocated to a suitable world where you can live under our protection," the transmission continued. "Do not think to resist. We have conquered 17 star systems. Our technology is beyond your understanding. Our weapons can crack moons, and our shields can withstand the radiation of stars. We offer you this chance to surrender only because we are civilized beings who prefer to avoid unnecessary violence." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. Around him, the bridge crew exchanged glances. These aliens had just threatened to destroy Earth and were calling it mercy. "Your death world has made you tough," Zethkar continued, "but toughness means nothing against superior technology. We will give you time to consider our generous offer. Use it wisely." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Morrison looked at his crew, seeing the mixture of fear and anger in their faces. They had trained for many possibilities, but an alien invasion had not been at the top of the list. "Commander Brooks," Morrison said, "get me a secure channel to Earth Command, Priority Alpha." Brooks worked quickly at her console. Within moments, the worried face of Admiral Patricia Kane appeared on the screen. "Captain Morrison, we received the transmission. Are you seeing their fleet?" Morrison nodded grimly. "Affirmative, Admiral. Long-range sensors show at least 3,000 vessels. They're using technology we've never seen before. Energy signatures are off the charts. What's our tactical assessment?" "Not good," Morrison admitted. "The smallest ships are larger than our biggest battleships. They're using some kind of energy shielding that our sensors can barely penetrate. If they're telling the truth about their capabilities, we're outgunned by a factor of about 1,000,000 to 1. Admiral Kane was quiet for a moment. "Captain, I want you to maintain safe distance and observe. Do not engage unless fired upon. We need to know everything we can about their technology and tactics." "Understood, Admiral." "What about the ultimatum?" 7 days, Kane said. "That gives us time to prepare. I'm calling an emergency session of the World Council. Every nation, every military force, every scientist and engineer on Earth is going to be working on this problem." The transmission ended, leaving Morrison alone with his thoughts. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the alien fleet. The ships were beautiful in their own way, sleek and curved like works of art. They moved through space with an elegance that human ships could never match. But Morrison had been born on Earth, and Earth had taught him something that these aliens might not understand. Beautiful things could be dangerous, and elegant things could be fragile. The most dangerous creatures on Earth were often the smallest and most unassuming. He thought about his home planet, with its storms and earthquakes, its predators and diseases, its endless challenges that had shaped humanity into what they were. The aliens called it a death world, and they were right. But they seemed to think that surviving on a death world made humans weak. Morrison smiled grimly. They were about to learn. How wrong they were. Back on the Velthari flagship, Ambassador Zeth Kar was reviewing the human response with satisfaction. The primitive species had made no immediate reply, which suggested they were considering surrender. This was wise of them. "Admiral Kethmer," he said to his military commander, "begin preparations for planetary occupation." "I expect this to be resolved within the week." The Admiral nodded. "Shall I prepare the standard occupation protocols?" "Yes, but be gentle with them. They are tough by primitive standards, but they have never faced a civilized military force. Once they see our power, they will submit quickly enough." Zeth Kar returned to his quarters, already planning the victory celebration. Another world would be added to the Velthari Empire, and he would be honored for his diplomatic success. The humans would learn to be grateful for Velthari protection, and their death world would become a curiosity for tourists. It never occurred to him that the inhabitants of a death world might have learned lessons that no paradise-born species could imagine. The emergency session in the United Nations building had been going for 18 hours straight. General Marcus Stone sat at the head of the table, his weathered face showing the strain of the impossible situation they faced. Around him, world leaders and military commanders from every nation on Earth tried to find a solution to an enemy that seemed unbeatable. "The numbers are clear," said Dr. Amanda Clark, pushing her glasses up her nose as she reviewed the data on her tablet. "Their technology is at least 500 years ahead of ours. Their energy weapons can punch through our best armor like paper. Their shields can deflect anything we can throw at them." President Martinez of the Americas leaned forward. "What about nuclear weapons? Surely they can't shield against everything." General Stone shook his head. "We've run the calculations. Even if we could get through their defenses, the radiation would only affect our own planet. Besides, their ships are too fast and maneuverable. They would see the missiles coming from 1,000 miles away." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what they were facing. The Velthari had given them 7 days to surrender, and 4 of those days had already passed. Traditional warfare was impossible against such an advanced enemy. Dr. Clark cleared her throat. I've been studying the biological samples we collected from their scout ships. The Velthari are remarkable in their own way, but they have some interesting limitations. She activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional model of Velthari anatomy. They evolved on a world with perfect atmospheric conditions. Temperature never varies more than a few degrees. No predators, no diseases, no natural disasters. Their entire evolutionary history is one of comfort and stability. General Stone raised an eyebrow. What does that mean for us? It means they're specialized for paradise, Dr. Clark continued. Their respiratory systems are incredibly efficient, but only within a narrow range of atmospheric conditions. Their nervous systems are highly developed, but they've never had to deal with stress or pain. Their immune systems are practically non-existent because they've never encountered hostile bacteria or viruses. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hayes, who had been quietly listening, suddenly straightened. Doctor, are you saying what I think you're saying? Dr. Clark nodded slowly. I'm saying that Earth itself might be our best weapon. These aliens have never faced anything like our environment. To them, our world really is a death world. Hayes stood up, his mind racing. We've been thinking about this all wrong. We've been trying to figure out how to fight them in space, how to match their technology. But what if we don't fight them out there? What if we let them come to us? The other commanders looked at him with confusion. General Stone frowned. Colonel, are you suggesting we let them invade? Not exactly, Hayes replied. I'm suggesting we make them think they've won. We let them land, let them occupy our cities, let them believe they've conquered us. Then we show them what it really means to live on a death world. Dr. Clark was nodding. Enthusiastically, it could work. Based on my analysis, I don't think they can survive long-term exposure to our environment. The atmospheric pressure alone would be challenging for them. Add in our bacteria, our weather patterns, our wildlife, and they would be fighting for survival every minute. General Stone considered this. It's risky. We'd be gambling with the entire planet. We're already gambling with the entire planet, Hayes pointed out. The difference is that this way, we're playing to our strengths instead of their strengths. Over. The next day, the plan took shape. It was unlike anything ever attempted in human history. Instead of trying to keep the invaders out, they would let them in and then use Earth's own hostile nature against them. Sergeant Kelly Price led a team of atmospheric specialists in a secret facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. They had been working around the clock to prepare Earth's air for the coming invasion. The plan was elegantly simple and terrifyingly effective. The compound is harmless to humans, Price explained to her team. We've been breathing trace amounts of it our entire lives. But based on Dr. Clark's analysis, it should be highly toxic to Velthari respiratory systems. They had identified dozens of naturally occurring compounds that would be deadly to the aliens. These substances were being quietly released into the atmosphere in carefully calculated amounts. To humans, the air would smell and feel exactly the same. To the Velthari, it would be like breathing poison. Meanwhile, in urban centers around the world, evacuation plans were being disguised as routine emergency drills. The plan required most civilian populations to be moved to safety before the invasion began. This had to be done without alerting the aliens to what was happening. Captain Morrison, still observing the Velthari fleet from his position in space, reported that the aliens seemed confident and relaxed. They were clearly not expecting any real resistance. They're treating this like a routine operation, Morrison reported to Earth Command. Their ships are maintaining standard formation. No signs of battle preparation or heightened security. This was exactly what the human planners had hoped for. The Velthari were so confident in their superiority that they weren't taking any special precautions. Dr. Emma Foster, working in a secure laboratory in Geneva, was studying another aspect of the alien psychology. The intercepted communications suggested that the Velthari had never encountered serious resistance in their previous conquests. They've conquered 17 worlds, Foster explained to her research team. But every one of those worlds was inhabited by species similar to themselves, species that evolved in stable, peaceful environments. They've never faced anything like humanity? The key insight was that the Velthari were not prepared for the kind of warfare that Earth had taught humans. Every human culture had legends of underdogs defeating superior enemies through cleverness, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. Staff Sergeant Ben Carter was briefing his special operations team on their role in the coming battle. These men and women had trained for years in the most hostile environments on Earth. They could survive in Arctic conditions, jungle humidity, desert heat, and underwater operations. What seemed impossible to most species was just another day at the office for them. Remember, Carter told his team, we're not trying to defeat them through superior firepower. We're trying to outlast them. Every hour they spend on Earth is going to weaken them. Every day they're here is going to make them more desperate to leave. The psychological warfare aspect was crucial. The Velthari were used to quick, decisive victories. They had never fought a war of attrition against an enemy that refused to surrender. Humans, on the other hand, had been fighting wars of attrition for thousands of years. As the seventh day approached, the final preparations were being made. Cities that couldn't be evacuated were being prepared for urban warfare. Weapons caches were being hidden in locations that would be easily accessible to human fighters, but difficult for the aliens to find. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to prevent the invasion, they would let it succeed and then make the aliens regret their victory. Earth would become a trap, and the Velthari would be the prey. General Stone stood in the command center, watching the countdown timer that showed less than 6 hours until the ultimatum expired. Around him, his staff monitored communications from around the world. Every military unit, every scientist, every engineer on the planet was ready to play their part. All units report ready, announced the communications officer. Stone nodded. Send the message to the Velthari. Tell them we surrender. The message was transmitted to the alien fleet, where Ambassador Zethkar received it with satisfaction. The primitive humans had seen reason at last. The invasion would proceed as planned, and another world would be added to the Velthari Empire. What the aliens didn't know was that the real battle was just beginning. Earth was about to teach them why Deathworlders were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Velthari fleet moved through space like a silver storm, their ships gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. Admiral Kethmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. The human surrender message had been exactly what he expected from a primitive species facing superior technology. Admiral, reported his tactical officer, human fleet is engaging our advance units. Kethmar nodded with satisfaction. The humans were making their token resistance, just as the other conquered species had done. It was almost traditional at this point. Proceed with standard engagement protocols. Do not destroy them completely. We need some survivors to help manage the occupation. In space above Earth, Captain Morrison pushed his ship through a desperate evasive maneuver as Velthari energy beams sliced through the darkness around him. The human fleet was fighting with everything they had, but it was like throwing stones at a mountain. Captain, called out Commander Brooks from her station, we've lost the Denver and the Istanbul. The Moscow is reporting critical damage to their engine systems. Morrison watched as another human ship exploded in a brief flash of light. They had known this would happen. The space battle was never meant to be won. It was meant to convince the Velthari that humanity was fighting conventionally, that they were trying to stop the invasion through normal military means. All ships execute withdrawal pattern Delta, Morrison ordered. Fall back to rally point 7. The remaining human ships began their retreat, just as the plan required. They had to make it look like a real defeat, not a tactical withdrawal. The Velthari had to believe they were winning on the Velthari flagship. Admiral Kethmer watched the human ships flee. Excellent. Their resistance was even weaker than predicted. Begin planetary assault procedures. The massive alien fleet moved into Earth's orbit, their ships positioning themselves above major population centers. Landing craft began launching from the larger vessels, carrying thousands of Velthari troops toward the surface. Commander Vextal led the first wave of ground forces toward New York City. His soldiers were the elite of the Velthari military, equipped with the finest weapons and armor their civilization could produce. They expected to find a terrified population ready to surrender. Instead, they found empty streets and silent buildings. The city that should have been full of millions of humans was deserted. Vextal ordered his troops to spread out and search for survivors, but every building they entered was vacant. "This is strange," Vextal reported to his superiors. "The city appears to be completely abandoned. No signs of panic or rushed evacuation. It's as if they simply vanished." From his hidden position in a subway tunnel, Staff Sergeant Ben Carter watched the alien troops move through the streets above. The Velthari were impressive in their silver armor and energy weapons, but Carter noticed something important. They moved awkwardly as if the gravity was wrong for them. Their formation was too rigid, too predictable. "Alpha Team, this is Carter," he whispered into his radio. "Targets are in position. Beginning Phase 1 observations." Carter had been watching the aliens for 2 hours now, and he was already seeing signs of stress. The Velthari kept adjusting their breathing apparatus, and several had removed their helmets entirely. Earth's atmosphere was affecting them more than they had expected. Across the city, similar scenes were playing out. The Velthari forces were securing empty buildings and finding no resistance. To them, this seemed like proof of their overwhelming victory. They had no idea they were walking into the most elaborate trap in human history. Dr. Emma Foster monitored the situation from her underground command center. Banks of screens showed Velthari units spread across the globe, all reporting the same thing: empty cities, no population, no resistance. The aliens were growing confident and careless. "Atmospheric readings are within acceptable parameters," Foster reported to General Stone. "The compound is working exactly as predicted. Velthari respiratory rates are elevated across all monitored units." The aliens were breathing poison and didn't even know it. The chemical compounds that Dr. Clark's team had released into the atmosphere were slow-acting but deadly. The Velthari would feel fine for hours, maybe even days. But their systems were slowly being damaged. In the Amazon rainforest, a different kind of trap was being prepared. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had positioned his teams in the dense jungle, waiting for the Velthari science teams that intelligence suggested would be coming to study Earth's unusual ecosystem. The jungle was perfect for what Hayes had in mind. The humidity was crushing, the heat was oppressive, and the air was thick with insects and disease. For humans who had evolved in such conditions, it was challenging but survivable. For aliens from a paradise world, it would be hell. "Remember," Hayes told his teams, "we're not here to fight them directly. We're here to let the jungle do the fighting for us. Just keep them moving, keep them confused, and let Earth take care of the rest." The first Velthari science team arrived just after dawn, their pristine environmental suits gleaming in the filtered sunlight. They immediately began taking samples and scanning the area with their advanced instruments. Within minutes, they were struggling with the humidity and heat. "The atmospheric conditions are more challenging than anticipated," the team leader reported, requesting permission to return to base camp for equipment adjustments, but Hayes had other plans. A carefully placed sound device played the recorded call of a jaguar in the distance. The Velthari froze, their weapons raised, scanning for threats they couldn't see or understand. Meanwhile, in the Arctic, Captain Morrison had crash-landed his damaged ship and was leading a small team of survivors through the frozen wilderness. The plan called for some human forces to be defeated and scattered, making the Velthari think they had eliminated organized resistance. The cold was brutal, but Morrison and his team had trained for Arctic survival. They moved efficiently through the snow, leaving false trails and setting up temporary shelters. Behind them, a Velthari pursuit team was struggling with the sub-zero temperatures. The aliens' environmental suits were designed for comfortable conditions, not extreme cold. Ice was forming on their equipment, and their energy weapons were losing power in the freezing air. What should have been a simple cleanup operation was becoming a nightmare. "Sir," one of the Valthari soldiers reported, "the temperature is affecting our equipment. Several units are reporting system failures." The pursuit leader was frustrated. These humans were supposed to be primitives, but they were moving through the hostile environment like it was their natural habitat. Every time the aliens thought they had cornered them, the humans would disappear into the frozen landscape. Back in New York, Commander Vexel was beginning to have doubts about the easy victory. His troops were reporting increasing fatigue and equipment problems. The city's concrete and steel seemed to radiate heat in uncomfortable ways, and the air quality was causing respiratory issues for several soldiers. "Medical team to Sector 7, he ordered. Multiple units reporting breathing difficulties. The Valthari medics rushed to help their comrades, but their equipment was designed for their homeworld's sterile environment. They had no experience with the complex atmospheric chemistry of Earth, and their treatments were proving ineffective. What the aliens didn't realize was that they were fighting on humanity's terms now. Every breath they took was weakening them. Every step they took was on ground that had been prepared as a battlefield. Every hour they spent on Earth was making them more vulnerable to the real attack that was coming from his command center. General Stone watched the reports flowing in from around the world. The Valthari were exactly where humanity wanted them. Scattered, confident, and slowly being poisoned by the very air they breathed. Phase 1 complete, Stone announced. "All units prepare for Phase 2. It's time to show these aliens what happens when you invade a death world." The attack began at dawn across 7 continents simultaneously. It was not the kind of attack the Valthari had expected. There were no massive explosions, no charging armies, no dramatic battles. Instead, Earth itself seemed to come alive with hostile intent. In the Amazon rainforest, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes watched through his binoculars as the Valthari science team stumbled through the dense undergrowth. The aliens had been in the jungle for 3 days now, and their pristine environmental suits were stained with mud and torn by thorns. More importantly, they were breathing hard and moving slowly. "Target team is showing signs of exhaustion," Hayes reported quietly into his radio. "Initiating wildlife protocol." The protocol was simple but effective. Hayes and his team had spent weeks mapping the locations of every dangerous creature in this section of jungle. Now they began herding the Valthari toward these natural hazards. Using subtle sounds and movements, the first encounter came when the lead Valthari scientist stepped too close to a bullet ant nest. The insects, aggressive and territorial, swarmed over his boot and up his leg. His screams echoed through the jungle as the ants delivered their famously painful stings. "Unknown hostile creatures," the scientist gasped into his communicator, requesting immediate medical support. But the Valthari medics had no treatment for bullet ant venom. Their medical knowledge was based on their own sterile world, where such aggressive creatures had never existed. They could only watch helplessly as their colleague writhed in agony. The team leader made the decision to move to higher ground, away from the insects. This was exactly what Hayes had hoped for. Higher ground in this part of the jungle meant spider territory. The golden orb weaver that dropped onto the second alien's shoulder was not particularly dangerous by Earth standards. Its bite was painful but not fatal to humans. However, the Valthari had no natural resistance to Earth toxins. Within minutes, the soldier was convulsing as the alien venom raced through his system. What kind of death world nightmare is this place? The team leader wondered aloud, his voice shaking with fear. Meanwhile, in the Australian outback, Captain Beth Adams was coordinating a very different kind of operation. Her team had been working with local wildlife experts to create what they called living minefields areas where the most dangerous creatures on Earth had been encouraged to gather. The Valthari Desert Patrol was learning about funnel web spiders the hard way. The aliens had set up their base camp near what appeared to be a convenient rock formation. They had no way of knowing that the rocks were home to dozens of the most venomous spiders on the planet. "Sir," one of the Valthari soldiers reported, We have multiple casualties from some kind of small attacking creature. The victims are showing signs of rapid system shutdown. The patrol leader looked at the small brown spider that had been captured and killed. Such a tiny creature could not possibly be dangerous to advanced beings like the Velthari. Yet 3 of his soldiers were already dead, and 2 more were dying despite all their medical technology. "Evacuate the area immediately," he ordered. "Request orbital support for sterilization of hostile life forms." But the orbital strike would not help them. Adams and her team had prepared dozens of such sites across the continent. Every time the Velthari tried to establish a permanent position, they would encounter Australia's legendary collection of deadly creatures in the Rocky Mountains. Colonel Steve Mitchell was demonstrating another aspect of Earth's hostility. His team had been tracking a Velthari mountain unit for 2 days, watching as the aliens struggled with the altitude and temperature changes. The Velthari were equipped with advanced environmental suits, but these suits were designed for the stable conditions of their homeworld. At high altitude, where the air was thin and the temperature dropped rapidly, their equipment was failing. "Suit integrity at 60%, one of the alien soldiers reported. "Life support systems are compensating, but power reserves are dropping." "Faster than calculated," Mitchell smiled grimly. The aliens were learning about hypothermia and altitude sickness, conditions that humans had been dealing with for thousands of years. The Velthari medics had no idea how to treat these ailments. The mountain team made the mistake of seeking shelter in a cave system. Mitchell and his men had carefully selected this particular cave because it was home to a large colony of bats. The mammals carried dozens of diseases that were harmless to humans but potentially fatal to aliens with no natural immunity. Within hours, the Velthari were reporting fever, respiratory distress, and neurological symptoms. Their advanced medical scanners could detect the presence of unknown pathogens, but they had no way to treat diseases that had never existed on their world. "Sir," the team medic reported, "we're dealing with multiple unknown biological agents. Our treatment protocols are ineffective. I recommend immediate evacuation to the medical ship." But the medical ship was dealing with its own problems. In the ocean, Commander Troy Davis was leading a submarine-based assault on the Velthari aquatic forces. The aliens had impressive underwater technology, but they had never dealt with Earth's extreme ocean environment. Davis had chosen the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean for his ambush. The crushing pressure at that depth was something the Velthari had never experienced. Their ships, designed for the shallow, calm seas of their homeworld, were struggling against forces that would crush them like tin cans. "Sonar contact," Davis reported. 3 Velthari vessels approaching from the northwest. "They're moving too slowly and staying too close to the surface." The aliens were afraid to go deeper, and Davis knew why. Earth's oceans were filled with creatures that were the stuff of nightmares. Giant squids, anglerfish, and other deep-sea predators that had evolved in the crushing darkness of the abyss. When the first Velthari ship ventured into deeper water, it was attacked by a giant squid that mistook the vessel for prey. The creature's tentacles wrapped around the ship's hull, and its beak began trying to crack the armor plating. "Unknown creature attacking hull," the alien captain reported in panic. "Tentacles are 15 meters long." Requesting immediate assistance. The Velthari crew fired their energy weapons at the squid, but this only made the creature angrier. It began constricting tighter, and the ship's hull started to buckle under the pressure, back on land. The psychological warfare was proving just as effective as the physical dangers. Lieutenant Nancy Evans was leading a team of special operations soldiers in what had once been downtown Chicago. The Velthari had occupied the city, but they were beginning to realize that controlling empty buildings was not the same as controlling a population. Evans and her team had been conducting hit-and-run attacks for a week, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. They would strike at alien patrols, cause damage, and then disappear into the urban landscape like ghosts. "We hit their communications array again last night," Evans reported to her superiors. "They're getting paranoid, jumping at shadows. Half their patrols are shooting at stray cats and pigeons." The Velthari were not accustomed to guerrilla warfare. Their previous conquests had been straightforward military victories against civilized opponents who fought according to established rules. Humans, shaped by millennia of warfare on a hostile planet, fought dirty. The aliens had expected to face armies, not invisible enemies who struck without warning and melted away before retaliation was possible. They had expected surrender, not a population that seemed to become more dangerous the more desperate they became. Commander Vextal, still trying to maintain control of New York, was beginning to understand the true nature of their enemy. These, humans are not like the other species we have conquered, he reported to Admiral Kethmore. They do not fight to win, they fight to survive. There is a difference. The Admiral was growing concerned. Casualty reports were coming in from around the globe. Not massive losses from great battles, but a steady stream of deaths from 1,000. Small causes: disease, poisoning, animal attacks, equipment failures, and psychological breakdown. Sir, his medical officer reported, we're seeing a pattern of symptoms across all ground forces. Respiratory distress, immune system failures, and neurological deterioration. It's as if the planet itself is toxic to our species. Admiral Kethmore stared at the reports with growing horror. They had not conquered Earth. They had invaded it, and now it was slowly killing them. The Death World was living up to its name, and the humans were just another one of its predators. The realization was starting to dawn on the Velthari leadership. They had not underestimated human technology. They had underestimated human nature. These were not civilized beings who would surrender when faced with superior force. These were survivors who had been forged in the fires of the most hostile planet in the galaxy. Earth was not just the humans' home. It was their weapon, their ally, and their greatest advantage. The Velthari were beginning to understand why the galaxy should fear Deathworlders. The end came not with a great battle, but with a slow realization of defeat. Admiral Kethmore stood in his command center, watching the casualty reports scroll across his screens. In 3 weeks, the Velthari had lost more soldiers to this single planet than in their previous 17 conquests combined. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving evacuation requests from all ground commanders. The jungle units are reporting 90% casualties from disease and hostile wildlife. The desert teams have been completely eliminated by unknown venomous creatures. The mountain forces are requesting immediate extraction due to equipment failures and altitude sickness. Kethmore felt something he had never experienced before in his military career. Fear, not fear of death in battle, but fear of a planet that seemed designed to kill everything that lived on it. How had the humans survived on such a world? Captain Morrison, leading what remained of the human space fleet, had been waiting for this moment. Intelligence reports suggested the Velthari were preparing to retreat. It was time for the final phase of humanity's plan. All ships begin final assault pattern, Morrison ordered. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to make them afraid to ever come back. The human ships moved in a coordinated swarm attack, using tactics learned from Earth's predators. They struck fast and hard, then disappeared before the Velthari could respond effectively. It was the same strategy that wolves used to hunt much larger prey. The Velthari fleet, designed for elegant space battles against civilized opponents, was unprepared for this type of warfare. Their ships were built for power and beauty, not for the chaotic, desperate fighting that humans had learned from a lifetime of survival. Sir, the Velthari tactical officer reported, the human ships are using suicide tactics. They're ramming our vessels with no regard for their own survival. But they were not suicide tactics. They were calculated risks taken by people who understood that sometimes survival required sacrifice. Morrison watched as Commander Brooks piloted her damaged ship directly into a Velthari cruiser, disabling both vessels but ensuring that her crew could escape in the life pods. On the surface, the final ground assault was being led by Colonel Danny Clark. His mission was to capture the main Velthari base and force a surrender. The aliens had chosen a location they thought was safe, on a flat plain away from jungles, deserts, and mountains. Clark and his team approached the base at dawn, moving through tall grass that provided perfect camouflage. The Velthari sensors were designed to detect advanced technology, not humans crawling through natural cover. Remember, Clark whispered to his team, they're weakened by 3 weeks on our planet. Their equipment is failing, their morale is broken, and they're probably sick from breathing our air. This should be easier than training exercises. The assault began with a coordinated attack on the base's power systems. The Velthari had become dependent on their environmental suits and life support systems. When the power failed, they were suddenly breathing Earth's atmosphere without any protection. Within minutes, alien soldiers were collapsing from what their medics called atmospheric poisoning. The compounds that Dr. Clark's team had added to the air were finally taking their full effect. The Velthari were slowly suffocating in an atmosphere that seemed perfectly normal to humans. Surrender now, Clark announced over the base's communication system. You have 10 minutes to lay down your weapons and prepare for evacuation. Your soldiers are dying, and we're the only ones who can help them. Commander Vextal, the alien ground commander, looked around at his remaining forces. They were a shadow of the proud army that had landed 3 weeks ago. Most were sick, many were dying, and all were demoralized by their experiences on this nightmare world. We surrender, Vextal said quietly. Please help our wounded. The irony was not lost on the humans. The species that had come to conquer Earth was now begging for medical assistance from the primitives they had planned to enslave. Dr. Amanda Clark, working in the captured base's medical facility, was treating Velthari casualties with a mixture of professional duty and scientific curiosity. Their biology is fascinating, she explained to her assistants. They're incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly fragile. It's like they're made of glass. The Velthari soldiers were suffering from dozens of conditions that were completely unknown to their medical science. Bacterial infections, viral diseases, allergic reactions, and toxic poisoning were ravaging their systems. Earth's biosphere was rejecting them at the cellular level. How do you survive on this world? One dying Velthari soldier asked Dr. Clark. Everything here is trying to kill you. Clark smiled sadly. That's exactly why we survive. We've been fighting this planet our entire evolutionary history. It made us strong, adaptive, and very hard to kill. Your world made you smart and advanced, but it also made you vulnerable. Ambassador Zethkar, who had been so confident 3 weeks ago, now stood as a prisoner in the human command center. General Stone looked at the alien with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. You called us primitives, Stone said. You said our technology was backward and our weapons were crude. You were right about our technology, but you were wrong about us. Zethkar nodded weakly. We did not understand. We thought surviving on a death world made you weak. We see now that it made you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The evacuation of Velthari forces began immediately. The aliens were desperate to leave Earth before more of their soldiers died from what they now understood was simple exposure to the planet's environment. Admiral Kethmar, preparing his fleet for departure, sent a final message to Earth Command. We formally surrender and request immediate cessation of hostilities. We will withdraw all forces and make no further claims on your world. We ask only for safe passage to leave your system. General Stone's response was broadcast to the entire Velthari fleet. You came here to conquer us. You threatened to destroy our world and relocate our people. Now you're asking for mercy. There was a long pause before Stone continued. We're not like you. We don't conquer peaceful worlds or threaten innocent people. You can leave. But understand this, Earth is under human protection now. If you or any other species threatens our world again, we won't wait for you to land. We'll bring the death world to you. The threat was clear. Humans had learned to survive on the most hostile planet in the galaxy. That same experience would make them incredibly dangerous in space combat, planetary assault, or any other form of warfare. As the Velthari fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying word of their defeat to the rest of the galaxy, Captain Morrison received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. "This is Counselor Erthka," the alien voice said. "We have received reports of the Velthari defeat. The Council wishes to formally apologize for the misunderstanding and to invite humanity to join the galactic community as equals." Morrison smiled. "We appreciate the invitation, Counselor. But we want to make one thing clear. We're not interested in conquest or expansion. We just want to be left alone to live on our world in peace. But if anyone threatens Earth or humanity, they'll learn the same lesson the Velthari just learned." The message was received and understood throughout the galaxy. Within days, Earth had been classified as a Level 5 threat world, and humans were designated as a protected species. No military action against Earth was ever again authorized by any galactic government. The Velthari Empire, once proud conquerors of 17 worlds, became a cautionary tale told in military academies across the galaxy. The lesson was simple: never underestimate a species that has learned to survive on a death world. Years later, when young aliens asked their teachers about the legendary human warriors, they would be told about the species that turned an entire planet into a weapon and used their hostile environment to defeat a technologically superior enemy. Earth remained a death world, but now it was a death world under human protection. And that made it the most dangerous place in the galaxy for anyone foolish enough to threaten the creatures who called it home. The humans had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to let your enemies defeat themselves. Earth had been their teacher, their ally, and their weapon. Now it would be their shield, protecting them from any future threats. The galaxy had learned why you should never declare conflict on Deathworlders.